YouTube? Michael here from the JankyYGO YouTube channel. Changing up the intro a little bit, and I'm here because we're going to talk about the Yu-Gi-Oh 2020 Create a Card project. It's going to be a shorter video, most likely, whatever. But I'm here to talk about this because I think this is something that is really cool that Konami is doing, and I love that they're trying to get the community more involved, especially with everything that's going on in the world. I think that's great, and I'm going to talk about the 16 themes, which decks I like, and which decks I would like to see support personally, and tell you where you guys can find and vote if you guys want to, in case you missed the video or whatever. Anyway, so here are the brackets. It's the weather painters and Gradles in bracket 1. Bracket 2 is Dynamist versus Lightsworn, Valkyrie versus Insect in C, Sylvan versus Cyber Angel in D, Fire King, X Saber in E, F is Fortune Lady and Hazy Flames, G is Mermail and Photon, H is TG and Frogs. Now, out of all of these decks, the decks, I'm going to start with my opinion, the decks that do not need the support as much as the others. That's probably Sylvans, Lightsworns, Mermails, and Frogs. And Insectors. Those are the ones, in my personal opinion, that do not need the support at least as much as the others on this list. Weather Painters have a decent amount of support, and they are a functional deck, but the problem with them, on why I say that they need support, is that they don't do enough. They can stall, a little bit. They don't stall hard enough to really be relevant. They don't, so they can, but, they do have access to cards like Skill Drain, and that's fantastic for the deck. Gradles are super slow, and at best are better for, mixing with and things, and they have seen some play in the past with players side decking them, and with Gradle Kaijus being one of the better rogue decks at one time. Dynamist were a decent tier 2-ish rogue deck at one point, but have since fallen out of the way. Valkyries are really bricky and never really took off, but they are pretty cool, and they have a unique mechanic of attacking your opponent and then skipping their turn and then attacking them once more immediately. That's cool. Insectors were once a tier 0 deck, and they were really insane, and then they got hit by the ban list, and they were irrelevant for years. But Insectors was one of those decks that I would always tell people that are like newish to the game, when they first faced them, there's a high chance you're probably going to lose to them because you don't know, what's going to happen. Nowadays, maybe not if they're playing one of the new meta decks, but, back in the Zexal era, it was very common, even with Hornet and Dragonfly at 1. Next up, Sylvans versus Cyber Angels. Sylvans, I personally like Sylvans more of a deck. I think that they're more fun to play than Cyber Angels, but I think I would argue that Cyber Angels need the support more, because Sylvans are decent, but I guess Sylvans also relied on Soul Charge really to go things, and I kind of skipped Lightsworn, but I still feel like Lightsworn is just a coherent enough deck that it doesn't need anything earlier in B. Cyber Angels are decent, and they kind of make their way in with Ben 10 and other decks. But as a functional deck on themselves, I don't think that they're as good, really. as Sylvan. So honestly, as much as I love Sylvans, which I'm still probably going to vote for Sylvans due to personal biasness, but if I were to just give a deck support and everything that would need it more, it would probably be Cyber Angels. Next up, Fire Kings versus X Sabers. Both of these decks are pretty cool. They're very unique in what they do. X Sabers attack all resources. They attack the hand. They blow up monsters. They blow up spells and traps. That's really cool idea for a deck. And they summon. They can synchro summon pretty good and everything. The only issue with them is they don't have many starter cards. They have like their turns usually take a turn or two to set up and then go. So if they do get support and they win this, it'd be a good starter card. And something similar with Fire Kings. Fire Kings try to get off the Garunic Sloop, and the Garunic Sloop is their big boss monster. If it's destroyed, it special summons itself back on the standby phase and destroys all other monsters on the field. The Garunic Sloop is when you get 2 of those, and you keep doing it. And then and it's a little easier to set up with Fire King Island now, but it's not as good as it could be. And the deck doesn't have much going for it outside of that loop. And I would like to, personally, I want them to get support, because I'd like to see, the deck move away from having to focus on that, since it's not as good in 2020, where you have to play through a bunch of negates. And even though there are some decks that will lose to the Fire King loop, like if you don't have like a bunch of negates and you're just kind of playing, a silly deck, Fire Kings could probably still wreck you. So I think I would rather see Fire Kings get a little bit more support, just, not focused on that. X Sabers I would like to see get more support, but if they do, it'd be something to kind of like get them started better than what they have. Next up are 2 of my favorite decks I've ever played out of this list, and I love them both for really different reasons. I love Fortune Ladies because of how much they draw cards, and that's just simply it. In all card games, especially Magic, drawing cards is my favorite thing to do. So Fortune Ladies is one of those decks that I just absolutely love, and I've considered buying the deck and everything, because they're not too expensive, I don't think. And then Hazy Flame is really funny to me, because like there was a time in Yu-Gi-Oh, and this was before Kaijus existed. This card, the card in the artwork, which is like Hazy Flame, I'll call it Mega Ultra Chicken, because I don't remember its actual name, but it's a rank 6, and that's kind of the Hazy Flames things, is they make rank 6s. But that card, when it has like 5 or more materials on it, it is really, really hard to kill. It can't be just targeted, it can't be destroyed, and it can banish things by detaching. And yeah, it can be really, really hard to deal with. In Yu-Gi-Oh! Nowadays, it's not as hard. We have Kaijus for the side deck. We have things like Nibiru, the Primal Being, to tribute as soon as you get to the 4-5 monsters or something, that you just tribute it and everything before they get there. And even if that doesn't happen and everything, and you only get 2, or you only get like you circumvent it with their continuous spell, which lets you just add materials onto it. It's still not as hard to get rid of. I mean, there's certain decks that still can't really deal with it, because it gains attack for each material as well. So there are decks that will have a hard time versus it still, if someone can get it off. But it's not the hardest card in the world to out, and I'd like to see them be able to make multiple of it, so it's a little easier. But yeah, next up, Mermail versus Photons. Now, I don't think either of these decks really need a ton of support, but out of these 2, Photon probably need it a little more. The deck has consistency issues, and that's about it though. When Photons go off, they can make some really insane plays, but they have really bad consistency, and then you'll just end up bricking like 90% of the time from what I've seen. Mermail is one of those decks that pops up and keeps popping up in competitive play. A new Atlantean comes out and the deck is broken, like with the Prince. Mermails were a strong tier 2 deck with Dragon Ruler spellbook format. The only decks that could somewhat compete at the time, they couldn't really compete, but they were the next best choices besides spellbooks and Dragon Rulers in that tier 0 format was Mermail and Evil Swarm. And so Mermail have always kind of been around. They were a tier deck back when Hat was during Hat format, where Infernity won the World Championships. They weren't really too much of a thing in Duelist Alliance format because of everybody running 3 Vanities. Made it really hard for the deck to play. But it's fine. And but yeah, they've always been kind of around. TGs and Frogs. So TGs as a main deck, aren't very good. They're pretty shit, for lack of a better word, and the whole thing is summing out this level 12 synchro that doesn't really do enough nowadays. Their best card is TG Hyper Librarian. So if they were to get cards for their main deck, it'd be great. As long as, they don't make another TG Hyper Librarian, I think it's fine. Frogs do not need support. They don't. Not at all. Frogs are really, really strong because of Totally Awesome and Paleozoics. I know specifically they said that they would be focusing on the Frog deck, and that's it. But, I think that Frogs do not need support. And if you're a big fan of Frogs and, you want to vote for them, by all means, that's what this poll is for. You should vote for the deck you want to see have support. Even if the deck has a ton of support, that's what this thing's for. I think for Bracket A, I'm honestly stuck because I like both these decks and I played both these decks. I might vote for Weathers because I like that deck a lot, and I just think that it's just underpowered at the moment. If you want to know where to vote for this, it'll be on the official Konami TCG Players Twitter page. I will leave a link to their Twitter so you can follow them and vote in the description. And yeah, that's it for today. If it's your birthday today, happy birthday. If you want to send us any cool deck profiles or replies, our email's in the description. This video probably ended up being a little longer than I had initially expected. But yeah, and of course, have a wonderful day.